to the History of Aviation podcast with Derrick, Beeler, David Rowe, and David Gorman.
All right, I want to welcome everybody into the History of Aviation podcast for this fifth episode. I'm Derrick Beeler, producer of the show, and I'm joined today by Mr. David Rowe and David Gorman. How you guys? Starting with you, David Rowe. How you been?
Oh, I've been great today. I've been decaling a pace car for Speedway and Lights today. So I have been up and down and all over a Camaro all day long.
That sounds fun.
That sounds like a great way to spend some time.
It's
easy for me to say because I'm not the one doing it. You did say detailing, so it's not driving.
No, I'm not getting to drive. Well, I did drive it into the building where we're decaling it, but it wasn't much of a drive. But finish it up tomorrow, and we'll be ready for some Christmas lights to start happening.
Always something out there, isn't it?
Absolutely, all the time.
And a lot of people probably just think that that's just, oh, here's the race, and that's all that happens there. But it's way more than that, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We literally have an event, if not every weekend, every other weekend, all year long, from probably mid-March until November. To Thanksgiving is when the Speedway and Lights starts, and so we have events constantly. Craft shows, drag races. We just had a gun show. It's just constant, something all the time.
That is truly amazing. A lot of people probably don't realize that, but not being from there. But you think race and one and done. But how about this airplane we're talking about? I think we jumped into another one where, most people that don't even really know aviation still know what this is.
I think the longevity of this plane has made it a well-known bird because it's been around since the mid-50s. So your parents grew up with it, and you've grown up with it, and your kids will probably grow up with it the way it's going.
I was thinking about this aircraft and just how it's such a recognizable thing. This is one of the few that I automatically know it just by sound. That it has a distinctive engine noise that when you hear it at 10,000 feet, you know it's up there. You can find it. Just a great engine sound and everything. But I mean, if you're going to see a military aircraft in the U.S., chances are it's going to be this one. They're everywhere. They're always in the air. They're always on the ADS-B. Around where we live, we see tankers plenty. But I mean, for the general population, the C130 is probably among the more widespread military aircraft that you're likely to see in the air at any time. So many uses, so much history, of course, but it's so versatile. It has performed so many jobs. And my gosh, as you said, David, it's been around for 70 years. So what in the world? How does that happen? Well, you start with a great plane and you just make it better.
Yeah, I think that's the exact right answer. Is they've just constantly improved it, upgraded it. New glass cockpits, new Rolls-Royce engines in it, new propellers, and new capabilities. So it just continues to be adaptable to anything and everything.
That's for sure. Sometimes you feel like, gosh, it's been adapted for so many things. You wonder, what came first, the job, or they had a plane, so they're like, well, what can we do with this thing? I mean, it was used in recovery of ejected film canisters from spy satellites. There was some use for that kind of thing, and it's been the Fulton Skyhook was used off of this thing, and it's been, my gosh, as a gunship. So many cool missions, and I know, David, you said over 70 variants were designed and constructed and built, and some more successful than others, but an incredibly versatile aircraft.
Yeah, the list of its uses are just amazing. It started out as an airlift aircraft, and it's been adapted to gunship, aerial refueling, airborne assault, search and rescue. The NOAA uses it as a hurricane hunter for scientific research, maritime patrol with the Coast Guard, and firefighting. And you can actually, as a civilian company, purchase one and just use it as a cargo hauler. So, I mean, it's totally versatile. Just whatever you need it to do, it can haul it.
Yeah, I just wonder what it's going to be used for 10 years from now, because it's going to still be flying.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's no end in sight for this because they keep upgrading it. I was reading something that the wing box was like the one thing that they had to watch for degradation. If it starts to fail, that's the place where you're going to have a failure. Although they do have some issues right now with the propellers on some of the old E and H models that are using those straight propellers. They've had to got some cracks in them, and they're having to replace those with those new curved bladed propellers that are just really nice looking. So once they get those upgraded, they'll be back in the air and doing their job day by day.
I know sometimes I've taken pictures of C-130s flying over at air shows, and you don't see it on the ground. There are some shows where they're just flying overhead and you don't actually see the takeoff. And I look at my pictures, and if I don't have my settings right and I freeze the props, I'm like, oh, that's one of those where they have 8 blades, 9 bladed props, and you can't tell when it's flying by, but boy, it sure looks cool.
Yeah, I think those are really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. What services, what U.S. branches of the armed forces have used the C-130? I mean, the Air Force, obviously.
The Air Force was, Guard. Yeah, the Air Force is the originator. That's they were looking for this aircraft, so it's their originator. But the Marines use it as a aerial refueler. Coast Guard uses it for maritime patrol. The Navy even tried to land them on aircraft carriers at one point back in the 60s as testing that out as a possible, carrier onboard delivery aircraft. And it was successful. It did about 20 touch and goes or 29 touch and goes and 21 landings and takeoffs. So, I mean, hugely versatile, but the Navy decided not to go that way. I think it was a little bit too big. So, I mean, all the major military have used it in the U.S. and obviously it's used by like 60 countries overseas. So, I mean, there's a lot of military folks using this plane.
One military group that's not using it, one country, is Libya. I was mentioning to Derrick about the effort by Muammar Gaddafi back 50 years ago to purchase 8 C-130s. He actually paid for them. And at that time, he was still kind of on our friends list, but things had changed by the time they were being built, and the U.S. decided not to send them to him. They're still on the at the end of the runway at Dobbins Air Force Base. You can see them in satellite pictures, and for a while they were maintained, and now they're left to the elements, and they're very early models. They're 50 years old, so they're not flyable. But it's kind of fascinating to think that they were parked, and we didn't refund the money. We can't destroy them because they still belong to another country. So
you mentioned you could
little history.
You mentioned you could see that on Google Earth still. Where about could folks look at that on Google Earth?
So I don't know which end of the runway, but if you look at the Dobbins Air Force Reserve Base, look at the main runway. I did it a few years ago, and it's at one end, and they're kind of they're parked very close together and crowded in a parking area off a taxiway to the main runway. So if I remember, they're not on the actual runway. They're on a taxiway or a place where they were just they could be parked there and left there until something changed, and nothing changed.
Nothing changed.
Yeah. He remained a bad guy, and we kept his planes. So some of the other uses, and when you see these guys flying at air shows. I mean, Fat Albert and Derrick, we could see in the background your picture of Fat Albert there.
I do. Yeah. I picked up
yep.
a picture at Smoky Mountain Air Show. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a thrill to see that. And if you had seen air shows with the Blue Angels in the past, they used to have the rocket bottles that they would attach the back of the fuselage for those rocket assisted takeoffs, which were great and fun and everything like that. But apparently they've depleted their supply of rockets some time ago. But man, that was a cool thing to see.
We didn't get to see that at the Smoky Mountain Air Show.
No, it's been maybe 10 years at least, I think, since they had those. But boy, they were cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Very, very cool. I got to see it a couple of times, and when that thing jumped off the runway, it was on its way up in a hurry.
Gone, yeah.
Climbed up and at a big, huge bank angle there, and not bank angle, but just a climbing angle, and then leveled off, and it was fun. Had to be a great ride from the cockpit. I wish I could have done that. Would have been neat. But also, you're liable to see the gunship versions that are pretty popular. Special Forces, C130s that sometimes show up and are parked static display at air shows, and popular with everybody who's just fascinated by all the guns that are hanging off of that thing. I mean, they really have kind of set a standard for, again, uses of a particular type of airframe. But you wouldn't want to run into these things. It's not some big, slow, lumbering craft that's a target. It could return fire or initiate fire and ruin your day pretty well.
You do not want to be on the receiving end of that.
No, they actually, I've caught them a couple of times at Tri-Cities Airport doing touch and goes. So I've actually seen them here locally, which, is always a thrill because, you look on one side and it's a regular Hercules, and you come to the other side and you're like, oh, what are those funny things sticking out? Oh, that's a gunship. That's what that is.
And it's interesting. I remember realizing that for the first time after seeing it probably 5 times, and suddenly it hit me that it's only on one side because it orbits. It orbits its target, so it doesn't have guns on both sides. It's going to take up station and orbit around and soften the target, as they say.
Yeah, very, very ingenious design that they came up many years ago for the DC-3, and it's just been adapted and upgraded into the Hercules now. So very packs a big punch.
Now, you mentioned about the Hurricane Hunter use, but I don't know which branch, if it was the Coast Guard or the Air Force, but I was pretty sure we've landed C-130s at Antarctica, haven't we?
That's correct. They outfit them with skis, and they go down and is it Murdoch?
Murdo,
that's it. Yes, thank you. But yeah, they've got a runway of ice, and basically they put skis on a Hercules, fly it in, land it on the ice, taxi it back, unload supplies for all the people, all the scientific experiments, load it up with whatever needs to come home, and bring it home. Yeah. So I mean, it's well, the next thing is when are they going to put floats on it?
Somebody's probably been thinking about it.
But yeah, that would be something to see, is to see that come in out of the skies and land on the ice and just skid right by you.
As we're talking about the C-130 Hercules, let's just dive into the specifications of this guy here. What are you guys' thoughts on that? It can carry a whole lot of things. Maximum takeoff weight of about 164,000 pounds. So, that's a lot of stuff at 164,000 pounds. The payload, 44,000 pounds. So you got a lot of airplane and a lot of payload capability, and the versatility of it. I mean, you can do pallets, you can do vehicles, you can do soldiers, paratroopers. What was it? They could do about
90 paratroopers, and I think you could get 90 paratroopers, 64 paratroopers, or 6 pilots. I mean, it's just capable of all kinds of carrying combinations.
Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I found is it's got a 4,500 cubic foot cargo area that duplicates the volume of a standard American railroad boxcar. So whatever you can put into a boxcar and run it down the rails, you can put it in this airplane and get it to this destination that much faster.
That's not accidental.
No, there was some really smart folks at Lockheed that figured that out and designed that into it. One of the interesting things I read about the Lockheed development is, when the Air Force was looking for this type of airplane and Lockheed decided to take a stab at the design, they showed it to Kelly Johnson, who is the Lockheed Skunk Works, the man behind all of the great airplanes that came out of that. And he looked at it and, he was used to building fast jets, pretty, sleek and really fast. And he looked at it and goes, this will never work. This will destroy Lockheed. And the engineer that was in charge, his name was Hal Hibbard. He decided to go ahead with the development, and they developed the Hercules, and it's been a massive success. Because, again, 60 years of development, and I think they're up to version J on the Hercules. So, I mean, how many aircraft make it to a version J in their, design? It's amazing.
Well, I know that those early C-130s had that, what they called the Roman nose, that cockpit layout and external look it's so strange to see that now, because of course they've modified and redesigned and everything, but some of those old planes are still in service, or at least visible in museums and things like that. But I really was fascinated by the conversion to firefighter use, and so the aerial application of fire retardant throughout the U.S. and no doubt in other countries, I would say. We were at Oshkosh a few years ago, and they had a tribute to aerial firefighting, and they had a C-130 that was demonstrating its application, how it lines up and puts out a pretty heavy stream of fire retardant. It was really cool to see, and it looked great. It was up there with some other. There was a couple of the Cal Fire planes that we were talking about, the A-10s, I think were there, but there were some of the smaller spotter planes, and then they had the big Mars flying boat that was there as well. But the C-130 looked great, and it still is a viable platform. Carries a lot of big load and 4 engines, so reliable and everything. I'm sure it's a favorite for those guys.
Yeah, it definitely has to be, because it's everywhere. They're using it all across the world for this kind of thing. So yeah, it's made for it, and it's performing it daily.
The 2,400 that were built in 70 years, and they're still building new airframes.
I believe they are. I didn't see anywhere that said that they were not.
An amazing run. You think about what else was being designed in the early 50s and, ran its course sometimes before the end of the 50s. But to think about C-130s and B-52s that are still flying, but, just great design and the function, the ability for the flexibility for those missions is amazing. Another mission I know that you were checking out, Dave, was the Credible Sport. What can you tell us about that?
That was back in the 1980, when the Iranian hostages were being held. And this was an attempt to try and rescue them. And unfortunately, there were some issues, and the aircraft didn't quite perform, I think, the way they expected. And I think they lost one, had to leave it there and destroy it. And it was again, try to rescue the hostages. They were, looking for anything. And, what did they land on? They landed on the Hercules because it's capable. It's short takeoff. And they gave it a try, but it just didn't quite work out.
Yeah, there's some video that I'd seen that shows them testing this thing, and it had rockets that fired downward to help really slow its. To drop it in on a stadium, it couldn't line up very much. It had to come in and drop down very quickly to get onto the playing field where they believed the hostages were held, and so they were testing all that kind of stuff, and they had some issues with the rockets firing too prematurely, if I remember, that took the wings off one time. And so some kind of rough looking video, but, again, seeing what we had available, and it didn't work. But if I think there is a credible sport aircraft that survived the testing that's down in Georgia at, I'm blanking on the name. Darn it! I've been to the museum there. Warner Robins.
Warner Robins, yes.
Yeah, and it was outside when I was there about 12 years ago, and I don't know if it's still sitting outside like it was, but I think if I remember, that was the first time I'd heard a credible sport, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? Because it had, these external fittings and things that were all designed to help it, make that kind of landing. It was rough looking, but. Again, as you say, they looked at the Hercules and thought, well, maybe this is the answer. This can get these guys out. They'd been held so long, and it was, we needed to try all the options. So,
yeah,
American
I think
ingenuity.
That's exactly there. We start thinking of ideas. You look at what's available and what's the best choice, and the Hercules was the best choice there.
I think it's funny because what you said about Kelly Johnson. Since the Hercules was designed at Lockheed, and that was his boss as well, that he didn't think it was going to be a successful design. It's so funny because it seemed like nearly everything he touched was gold. He certainly had some successes with some amazing aircraft in his career, but I don't know how you could predict in 1952 that this plane would still be top of the line transport. And again, like I said, it's one of the more visible military planes that you would see flying overhead in this country.
Yeah, some interesting quotes that I came across was the C-130 Hercules, the plane that defined tactical airlift. The C-130 formed the backbone of the airlift system, the most successful military airlifter ever. And this one I really liked was the Immortal Hercules.
That one's my favorite.
It's been here forever, and seems like it'll stay here forever.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to retire it. They've made it better. And it is definitely a different airplane than when it first came off the drawing board. And who would have known? But they still are defining missions for this aircraft and training new pilots in it. There are people flying aircraft that maybe their grandfathers flew, which is pretty amazing if you think about it.
So as we're talking about the C-130 Hercules here on the History of Aviation podcast, let's jump into final thoughts on this. Then I want to get into the air show you guys are headed to. Let's get some final thoughts on the C-130 Hercules, starting with you, Dave Gorman.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed seeing this plane because you never know what it's going to be doing. And seeing it in air shows, it could come over slow. It could come over in a flight of, 4 or 10 or something like that and kind of fill the sky. I've seen air shows where people have jumped out of it. I've seen where there have been pilots that have come out of it. It's so versatile. And of course, Fat Albert, as flown by the Blue Angels, is always a treat. And we should recognize today's the anniversary of the founding of the United States Marine Corps. and Fat Albert is crewed by a Marine Corps crew. So Semper Fi, and thanks for all those great shows that we've seen. But I love seeing this plane. I never get tired of it. It's not some slow, big, dumb cargo plane. It's a sexy beast, and it is always a great thing to see flying. It's a great thing to see on the ground. I've walked through them when they have them open at air shows, and it's just great to see. It feels like home.
David Rowe.
The Hercules is always something I look forward to seeing. Particularly, I love to catch them as they're flying over. There's a little joke that I have with a couple of people that we call them stealth Hercs, because they'll be flying over at 20,000 feet. There's no contrail. They're painted gray, and they blend into the sky. You can hear them. You know it's a Hercules from the sound, but darn if I can see them through my camera. So they frustrate me, but I always look forward to seeing them when they come flying over. They are just, those darn stealth Hercs, man. I just had one this week it's an Egyptian C130, comes through every couple of months. And every time I've tried to catch it, it's like, I know you're up there. I hear you, but I can't see you. So love to catch them, and glad that they're going to be around for a good long time to come.
Guys, that was a great discussion about the C-130 Hercules here on the History of Aviation podcast. So you guys are headed to an air show. I can't go, so tell us all about this air show you guys are headed to pretty soon here, right?
Yes, it's the Warbirds over Monroe. It's pretty much the last air show of the season. They always have a pretty good turnout of aircraft, a lot of World War II planes. Currently, I know they have a P-40 Warhawk and a P-51 Mustang, and I believe there's a Pitts biplane that's already there. And if you don't know, Monroe is the home to a C-46. They keep it there. So there's several things to see. Last chance of the year. It's right below Charlotte, so it's about a 3-hour drive for me. It's a great show, and I always try to make that trip over. And the bonus of going to that show is I always try to stop at the Charlotte airport and check out their overlook and watch some big passenger planes come in and out. So there's kind of a dual trip for me, as you go to the air show and then head over to the overlook and watch planes into the darkness.
You do enjoy that on your way back home. I know that you've got great pictures and great stories about everything you see coming in and out over there. That C-46 that they keep over there is pretty fantastic. The Tinkerbell, although it's been a little while since I've seen her fly, I keep hoping that maybe this will be the year that we see it again. They're kind of rare anymore down in this part of the country, but they are fun to watch. Berlin Airlift has their C-54 there. We've seen her a few times this year. A couple of P-51 Mustangs and some other there's flying helicopters, Vietnam War helicopters and things. It's a great show. It's a great way to end the year. It's not that far away. So Dave and I will both be down there on Sunday. It's a 2-day air show, and it's a great time. It's definitely worth it. They work hard. This will probably be about my 4th time or 5th time going to this show. So not too far to travel to, easy to get to, easy to get back home. So a great show. Well,
definitely, guys. Put some pictures on the History of Aviation podcast Facebook page.
You don't have to tell us twice.
So we don't. So us that can't go, that have other obligations, can't go. So we'll get to live vicariously through you, I think is that term.
We will be glad to rub it. To share those with you.
Well, guys, I sure enjoyed it. It was a great discussion about the C-130 Hercules. And let me jump into the Patreon program here just real quick. We have a Patreon page where you can go and donate to keep the show going. So I will put that in a link below. We won't push that on you. Just anybody that has the means to and likes the show, we would definitely appreciate that. Right, guys?
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's been a great show, and I'll go ahead and close everything out. So for David Gorman, David Rowe, I'm Derrick Beeler. Thanks for listening to the History of Aviation podcast.
Morse. You are listening to the History of Aviation podcast with Derrick Beeler, David Rowe, and David Gorman.